Welcome to the Enterprise Thought Leadership Podcast, where we explore the latest in enterprise trends, tech, and strategy with the top leaders shaping the future.
Hi, we welcome you to a podcast on stage with enterprise thought leaders. My name is Kanika, and I'm the managing editor of Enterprise Talk, which is our enterprise technology publication. We have engaging conversations with global thought leaders and industry experts, which reach about 1.3 million business leaders worldwide. Ordnance Survey might be the best known for paper maps and countryside rambles, but behind the scenes has been quietly undergoing a serious tech transformation. Think AI-powered feature extraction, a responsible AI charter, and mapping data that can be queried by natural language thanks to the large language models. It's not just about tech for tech's sake either. The team is grappling with what responsible innovation really looks like, which balances heritage and progress, upskilling long-standing staff, and putting ethics at the heart of development. It's timely as the institution is helping the government with their infrastructure agenda, net zero ambitions, and housing developments. Today, we speak with Manish Jethwa. He's a Chief Technology Officer at Ordnance Survey, and we ask him more about how a 230-year-old national institution is embracing AI without losing sight of its roots. It's promising to be a very interesting conversation, Manish.
Good to be here. Thanks, Kanika.
A little bit about Manish before we start. With a background in engineering science from the University of Oxford and a PhD from MIT in computer vision and urban modeling, Manish brings over 2 decades of experience in geospatial technologies and AI. At OS, he's spearheading digital transformation through AI-driven, user-focused geospatial platforms and data value chains. Is there something I'm missing about you? Would you like to introduce a little bit about OS before we start asking you the questions?
Yeah, that summaries. I think it goes way back. I mean, I've been in the geospatial area for most part of those 2 decades, delivering applications mainly for the public sector, help with infrastructure asset management. So it feels like although I've only been at OS for less than 2 years, the domain is very familiar to me. So it's a good space to be in.
So my first question, and I think logically the first question as well, at the very base of it, how is technology equipping this institution for transformation, change, anything you want to call it?
Sure. I mean, I think you touched on this in the introduction, really. I mean, the organization has been around for over 230 years, and predominantly we are known for our maps, right? The Explorer and Navigator maps. And then more recently, probably the OS Maps application. So it's really transfer of those kind of paper maps with a lot more discoverability onto a mobile platform. But that's really only a small part of what Ordnance Survey does. And the demands on the data that we provide, both into public sector and commercial, is really one in which kind of equipping organizations to be able to make decisions. And the demands on our data has really changed quite a lot over that 2 centuries. There's a demand for much more coverage, much more data, and certainly much more often. And as part of that, we've had to continuously evolve the way the organization is run and the data that we provide, and the systems that really underpin the data delivery. So we talked a little bit about AI there, and AI can play a kind of really critical role in kind of helping with that production process. And certainly we've utilized it for more than 10 years now internally, predominantly in the deep learning space, with an idea of how do you really extract features automatically from either aerial imagery, drone imagery, and we're also exploring areas of Earth observation, so satellite imagery, what can you extract out automatically in order to be able to deliver that kind of higher currency of data out to our users. So, in terms of the evolution of the organization, it's been a continuous one over that period. I think the organization has always had to push itself to the forefront of what technology was capable of delivering. And certainly in terms of our adoption of AI, whereas a lot of organizations right now are embracing it from the perspective of generative AI and how that can help productivity. And we're doing that too. But in the realms of kind of deep learning, we've been in that space for a long time. So it certainly feels like the organization is a great one to be in if you're interested in kind of continuously kind of evolving and continuous improvement, which is something I'm quite passionate about.
So another very basic question. How does your organization apply AI and machine learning? So if you could just explain a little bit more in detail to make sense of
Sure.
what used to be paper maps and countryside rambles, as it were.
Yeah, sure. And I think, so the paper maps are quite an interesting way of kind of accessing data. So, historically we've been delivering a single map that had a lot of the embedded data in it, whether that was printed or probably more than a decade ago where we developed the master map, which had a rich degree of features in the map. And then it was up to the user to be able to really filter out the information that they required, and they could really ignore the bits of information that wasn't relevant for their specific use case. How that's evolved now is that the data is being delivered much more fractionally. So, buildings and the built environment will be delivered separately from the natural environment. And there's more of an onus on the user to be able to then construct the data sets that they need. But this becomes much more relevant when you're doing kind of analytical processes on the data. So rather than overloading the systems with vast quantities of data, you just kind of pick and choose the things that you need. Now, that does create a bit of a challenge for our users when it comes to identifying which bits they should and shouldn't be using. You typically have to delve into the technical specifications to be able to extract out that information. And that relationship between the everyday language we use for the problems we're trying to solve and the technical specifications actually is a really unique opportunity for generative AI and the large language models to be able to bridge that gap. So you hinted at this in the introduction that we're utilizing those generative AI models to be able to provide that translation and to some degree also the agentic access directly into our through our APIs onto our system so that you can pull the data that's relevant. So that's certainly on the application side, a use of AI, a relatively new area that we're looking at. But historically, the AI has really been around deep learning, creating foundational models that can really understand spatial data, and then processing imagery to be able to extract out the features that are most relevant to us. So it could be that we're looking for land cover and trying to identify what kind of land cover. A recent data set that we delivered last year was to do with roof material types. So here's an example where we're analyzing images and automatically trying to identify what the roof material might be, also the aspect of the roofs, and potentially then understanding the area and solar potential. So you can immediately see there's an application for AI in terms of extracting this information automatically in a combination with computer vision and other methodologies to be able to then provide a much richer data set out to our users so that they can start making the decisions that they need to and get the insights out.
So you spoke about users. How does it help the government with their infrastructure agenda, their net zero ambitions, and housing developments that they might want to work on?
Sure. I mean, there's a large part of our data obviously is it's available free for all of the public sector customers through the PSGA contract, and the way that really works is that a lot of the data we provide there. I mean, the example I just gave there around solar potential is certainly one acting towards the net zero agenda. There's also one around identifying land use and opportunities for building housing, because we know that there's a challenge there on identifying the right spaces. We've also got, creating the data sets to be kind of accessed much more in a streamlined manner by the number of different authorities which are kind of, I guess, part of that process to be able to enable planning for housing is also a bit of a challenge, because that tends to be the big blocker in there. It's not about identifying the land that could be developed on. It's all of the planning processes that go beyond that. And there's a whole set of connected information that's required in order to be able to help come to that kind of decision at the end. So providing these fractional data sets actually enables our users through things like the unique property reference numbers to be able to identify which properties are there, and using it as a foundational data to connect multiple different data sets together is really kind of the foundation model that OS delivers.
Right. But with such rapid digitization and now AI being at the front and center of every development, what do you see as the role of human creativity in a digital first workplace or a product paradigm? So, for instance, what I'm actually asking is we've all grown up with maps. So,
Yeah.
now what happens if the entire thing is digitized? How different is it going to be? Would there be any kind of an issue across generations to be able to access the data easier? What do you think about that? Did you guys take that into consideration before this thing started?
Well, I mean, I think with the model that I was talking about utilizing more generative AI tools and the agentic approach, I think that does start to tackle that specific point around kind of digital first. But I think the challenge is all around us, right? I mean, even just working with a large, relatively large team, most of which are going to be remote, and this is organization. Most organizations are dealing with that challenge. So we really need to be able to utilize the digital technology that's available there to be able to help connect these remote resources that you have and maximize the opportunity for that collaborative innovation to really happen. So whether it's through generative AI tools are on one side in terms of accessing mapping, and I can talk a bit more about that. But I think generally we should be thinking about how do we really leverage the digital tools that we have to get the most out of our workforce to be still kind of innovative and creative. On the side of the generative AI, I think the opportunity that's really available to us now, which I think is only just become kind of available through over the technology horizon, is one in which we can really have much more of a conversation with technology. So you can think about the way that we've interacted with maps historically, and even through the development of other mapping interfaces, has typically been you have a map type interface, but then you're going through layers and trying to enable switch things on and click and connect. But that's only aspects of connecting to the data, and typically what we're trying to get out is the insight from the mapping the information. So here we have this kind of phrase that people aren't after light bulbs, they're after light, and in the same way they're not after the actual data, they're after the insights. So we should be thinking about how can you actually have a conversation with the map? How do we enable the ability for us to be almost in natural everyday language, be able to ask questions of the map and for it to be able to respond? And actually the generative AI offers that real unique opportunity to translate everyday language into queries that then fetch the data that's relevant and then be able to then visualize it and display it on a map. So we've been playing around with prototypes that can actually help to deliver this. So, kind of data exploration tools where you can ask it about certain areas and to be able to highlight buildings that have certain solar potential. How would you be able to automatically pull that data out and display it on the map and then say, okay, exclude any areas that are, have already got a kind of energy performance rating under this value, and start to really combine data sources from multiple different locations and producers, and be able to then answer those kind of insightful questions that are valuable then to either a government agenda or a commercial one. So I think there's a huge opportunity for us right now with the availability of the tools and how the data is being delivered to be able to change the way we interact with data and get to the insight much quicker. Whereas I think historically it's been left in the hands of a few GIS experts to really do the data mangling and manage that. And then, the opportunity right now is really, really big.
One more, as opposed to forward-looking, backward-looking question. Despite all technologies, we cannot completely wish away legacy platforms or infrastructure or legacy tools. We also cannot overlook the scale when it comes to organizations like the Ordnance Survey. At the end of the day, everything needs to support the government to deliver the highest public good. Now, what does this transformation look like under the circumstances of there being existing legacy platforms and tools and probably even skills that you have to grapple with? How are you uh, probably able to handle that kind of transition or change management, if I may call it?
Sure. I mean, I think this is a challenge for many organizations, but I think especially kind of at Ordnance Survey, not because we've been around for over 200 years, but much more because the data sets that we provide, and to some degree, even utilizing tools like AI, the challenge is that we have to continue to deliver those data sets year on year and ensure consistency and trust remains in the data. So this creates a bit of a problem because typically you can build AI models to solve a specific problem, but to be able to maintain them to ensure consistency, you need a whole kind of framework and governance around it. And our data sets, once they're embedded, because they are so foundational, it just means that you can't just stop kind of generating that. So those legacy systems that you're talking about that underpin a lot of the foundational data sets need to be evolved in a way which is not managed through, I think traditionally they would have been managed through kind of transformation projects internally, right? And there's probably programs and projects to be able to help that transformation and probably large waterfall projects to be able to deliver it. So one of the things we're doing internally at OS is really moving from the old programs and project approach to much more of a product-led approach, which enables us to be able to look at the entire life cycle of how we're delivering delivering data and the systems that underpin it, and then allow us to be able to make continuous improvements in a much more agile fashion, but making sure that we're continuing to deliver the needs of the customer. And that's kind of one way in which we can manage the whole life cycle all the way through to decommissioning and replacing them with new, more strategic systems kind of fit for the future. But it is a real challenge kind of trying to maintain both the skills in-house and the technology while you're trying to build the strategic systems for the future. And that transition has to be always with the consideration of the customer in mind, making sure that that migration from one data set to the new shiny data set is always going to be thoughtful from the perspective of the user and how painful that might be. So it is one that we're taking into consideration, and the whole kind of operational model of how we work within technology and OS as a whole is much more product-led now than it's ever been before.
And certainly it would not be easy to do this with an organization that is over 2 centuries old. There will be systems and processes and mindsets and I don't know, everything we can think of that can stand in the way of, maybe a very postmodernistic look at that.
Yeah,
So,
luckily all of the equipment that we have that's, back from the days when we first started, like the first theodolite, are now in kind of a museum piece in the building. We're still not using that technology anymore, but it's that continuous thinking ahead. And I think we as an organization always need to be thinking 10, 15 years into the future. One, in terms of what are the customer demands of the data going to be, but also how are we going to go about producing that data and serving it out to our customers? Because the demands are changing. We know that our systems have to change in a way that can help to provide and connect to AI agents for them to be able to pull the data. There's a huge demand for data to be utilized for training AI systems, both in the UK and internationally. So we have to be really mindful about, one, making sure that the data is being used ethically, that we're kind of responsibly utilizing AI and other technology tools to be able to produce our data sets, but then also mindful about making sure that we are serving the customer both today, tomorrow, and then into the future. So yeah, huge challenges for us, but it's an enjoyable space to be in, and it's one that I think most people would be excited about working in an environment like OS.
Yeah, because how many people get to work on centuries old institutions in any case? So one quick question, Manish, and that's not included in the questions, is just for my knowledge. AI is an evolving field, so there will be new things that you can do with it, almost on a very regular basis, maybe even daily, if I could say that. How do you intend to incorporate all those newer developments into what you're doing? How do you intend to convince the existing systems and the people who are working with them that, okay, this is another new thing that we've come up with and this is going to make it even better? That is also a part of your change management, right? I mean, you've done it till now and you have to keep doing it for the future as well.
Yeah, and it is a challenge because organizations like OS that have a strong foundation of trust means that typically, organizations like that are quite risk averse. And I think, it's fair to say as an organization, having worked here for a couple of years, that comparatively to organizations, small startups that can take those risks, we have to be very careful about maintaining our reputation and trust. And so, how we incorporate AI into our estate is one in which we have to be really kind of mindful about, like I said, the ethical, responsible, taking a responsible approach and ensure that the tools are used ethically. But as part of that, we have to also be mindful about what is the activity that we might be either changing or replacing through the use of that AI, and how do we make sure that training, so the training and kind of upskilling of our employees is a key kind of strategic pillar in our AI strategy, and making sure we are kind of being always thoughtful about what the impact's going to be on our teams internally. And typically you also want to have an AI governance process to make sure that those tools are right for the application and are going to deal with kind of deliver higher productivity out. But the challenges of using AI are one in which you typically do introduce a level of uncertainty in the data, right? It's very different from manual-based extraction. And so you've also got to think about how can you deliver extra assurance out to your customers. So, in the roof materials example I just talked about, there's a high likelihood that, there's the roof materials will be extracted using the same methodology as a human would. If you're looking from looking through aerial imagery and trying to identify what materials were used, in some cases we have materials that are designed to mimic others. So clearly, if they can fool a human, they can also fool an AI. And so we've got to be able to provide that level of certainty or uncertainty also in the data that we deliver, and communicate that as well. So as we move to more kind of AI-based tools for extraction, we've also got to augment our data with a degree of certainty so that users who are using that data know the principles by which they were extracted and how to be able to utilize them in the field. Because their applications might be in areas where you need a very high degree of accuracy, in which case you've got to take some account for what was the methodology used for extracting it. And I think this is where OS differs from a lot of other organizations, where you don't really get to see how the data is extracted, and it's just kind of delivered out to you. And it's up to you to be able to then judge whether that's trustworthy or not data. But for us, I think it's a real kind of foundational element that the whole OS brand is built on, the fact that you can trust the foundational data sets that we provide for GB. And so it's really important to us that we can augment our data sets with a degree of assurance and certainty about how you can go about using it.
So that's all the questions I had. If there's something you'd like to share which was not included in these questions, you can do that. And if you think
I think we've covered most of the things I was keen to kind of share with you. So I think hopefully that's fine.
Yeah, absolutely good.
Thank you for joining us for the Enterprise Thought Leadership Podcast. Please do follow us on social media and subscribe for more ideas and insights. Until next time.